Okay, I'm just gonna wait for everyone to join again. Sorry, I had to quickly sign off. So I was getting a question. Hey girly. Hey guys, thanks for joining me again. Remember, you can ask your question again if I didn't see your question or didn't get to it yet. Just ask it again. But I was just getting a question on what are some good meal ideas if I can't do dairy. So the first thing is, whenever somebody says when I can't do dairy, I immediately remind them that if you can't do dairy, there is a problem. It is not like, it's like if you, like I've always said, I was like, if you say, oh, my leg muscles are weak, so I'm just not gonna work them, it's the same thing. People are like, oh, so I can't do dairy, so I'm just gonna cut it out. And I'm like, you can cut it out, but you need to fix why you can't digest dairy. There's a problem that needs to be fixed. It's not the dairy's problem, it's the body's problem. And usually it's low progesterone, low T3, and small intestinal bacteria overgrowth that needs to be cleared. In the meantime, you guys can totally do no dairy. You're not going to get a lot of the good nutrients in dairy, but you can keep your meals dairy free. I mean, I just had yesterday for lunch peas with grass-fed butter and grass-fed beef. And that's a non-dairy meal. I mean, you could easily change the butter out for ghee or coconut oil. You can do like rice and meat. You can do, like root vegetables, like roasted sweet potatoes or roasted potatoes, and some kind of protein like bone broth or eggs or something like that. So, you can very easily do no dairy. But when it comes to not being able to digest dairy, the goal is to fix the problem that's keeping you from digesting dairy. Like I said, if you can't digest dairy, there's a problem, and cutting out dairy doesn't fix the problem that is causing you to not be able to digest dairy. Bovine collagen versus marine collagen. Bovine collagen all the way, girl. So, remember that fish bones are not the same as grass-fed beef bones. So, you definitely want to stick to the bovine. Also, keep in mind, you guys, with collagen, that the quality totally matters. And if the company that you're buying from is not processing the amino acids or breaking those amino acids down, because remember that collagen is made from gelatin, and gelatin gets really gelatinous when exposed to liquid. It gets thick and viscous. And so the companies take gelatin and break down the amino acids so that it no longer gets gelatinous. But in the process of breaking down amino acids, toxins or MSG can be created. And so you do not want to just buy collagen from just anybody. You want to make sure that people are processing it in the right way. So I really like Great Lakes collagen, and they process it in the right way. Is breast tenderness for a few days before your period normal? No, that is a sign of estrogen dominance and low progesterone, most likely. But you definitely want to look into estrogen and getting your progesterone levels up for sure. Avocado oil can't be heated. Isn't smoke point 500 degrees Fahrenheit? Smoke points are BS. Species. I'm like, oh, I get so irritated when people are like, they think that the smoke points are high on plant fats because they're being told that. And it's just like, oh, it just makes me angry. So when it comes to plant fats, you guys, they're very sensitive to heat and light. And regardless of what somebody said on Google that a smoke point is, doesn't really matter. It really matters what's actually happening. And science shows us that plant fats are kind of unstable. And so it's just better to be safe than sorry. Plus, avocado oil is just not sustainable. In nature, you would never take 50 avocados and press them for their oil. You know what I mean? First of all, that would be expensive. And second of all, why? So it's just important to stick to fats that are going to actually provide therapeutic benefits. So I don't say avoid avocado oil at all costs. If you're having a salad dressing that has avocado oil, that's way better than canola oil. But I wouldn't pound avocado oil and cook in avocado oil. I know it's easier. A lot of people get really pissy because I tell them you got to cook with coconut oil or you got to do grass-fed butter, and they're like, but it's solid. I got to wait for it to melt. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so hard. So just don't cook with it. Use it cold. Use it for cook or use it for like dressings and things like that. And maybe, it's something that actually can simplify your life and you don't even have to buy it any longer. You can use olive oil as your cold oil and just mix something all together. To me, I love to simplify things, and I feel like some things in health and wellness can be so complicated, and it's like so much easier for me to know, like, I cook with either coconut oil or grass-fed butter, and cold oils is olive oil. That's all I have. I don't need to go crazy with all these different oils. So it's really a personal preference, but if you're trying to heal metabolically, I really recommend sticking to saturated fats that are very heat stable. Which collagen source is better, bovine or marine? Do not use marine collagen, you guys. How do you know if you have an external mold toxicity issue or an internal candida fungal issue? Are symptoms and treatments similar? Well, if it's an internal issue, then it needs to be removed. If it is a external issue, you need to remove yourself from the environment. So there's two different things. Usually when it comes to mold toxicity, if you're getting mycotoxin testing, which is what, if you suspect you have mold toxicity, that's the first step you should take, is just get a mycotoxin test. If you have huge levels of mycotoxins, like, you're just flying out of that reference range, then it's probably an environment issue. It could be internal, but at that point, usually when people suspect they have fungal issues, they need to get a test, a gut test, to see if there's fungal issues. And then if there's no fungus in the body, then it's like, okay, I still have huge amounts of mycotoxins coming in. Where is it coming from? It's most likely coming from your environment. If there's small amounts of mycotoxins, it can absolutely be coming from some food you're eating. Peanut butter is really rich in mycotoxins. Coffee can have some mold on it. So it's just like one of those things where if you truly suspect issues like that, instead, you should never blindly go into something like that. If you suspect that issue, it probably is in order to get a GI test and a mycotoxin test, so you can start to actually see what's going on. Do you think that gluten sensitivity can be reversed? It's hard to explain because I think people just don't understand gluten sensitivity. So remember, you guys, that wheat is now hybridized. It's no longer wheat. Wheat is now a wheat grass, and you're not a cow, you can't digest grass. So unfortunately, humans have spliced wheat with grass over the course of the past couple hundred years, and it now has way too many chromosomes to be actual wheat. So, because wheat is so genetically modified and so hybridized, and it's very difficult to find wheat that's not unless you get it from Europe, it's called einkorn wheat, then you might be reacting to just the fact that it's just so hybridized. When it comes to gluten sensitivity, a lot of times what's happening is, remember that gluten is a trypsin inhibitor. Trypsin is needed to actually make enzymes in the digestive tract. And so when you are consuming too much gluten, you can actually get to the point where your body is just so bogged down by this trypsin inhibitor, it kind of makes things really move very slowly through the digestive tract like glue. And so, I personally was diagnosed with celiac disease 4 years ago, and I now can eat sourdough, no problem. So, for me, I'm I think it's more about digestive capacity and just having a digestive system that's working optimally. Now, of course, I'm not promoting, if you have celiac disease, you should probably stay away from wheat at all costs. However, I'm just an experimenter, and I'm fine with experimenting on my own body. So it's one of those things where I think that gluten sensitivity, it's not about being reversed. It's just why are you sensitive to gluten? You probably have a wrecked digestive system, or it's very, very irritated, and the microvilli in there can no longer break down the harsh protein that is gluten. And so it's just because your digestive system is already impaired, adding a trypsin inhibitor into that is going to even make the digestive system work less well. And so it's really if you want to be able to consume gluten again, it's most likely something that's going to probably take a lot of time to get to a point where you could maybe do that. And so the goal would not be I'm healing my gut so I can eat gluten again. The goal would be yeah, I know that my body doesn't really do well on gluten, and it's probably going to take a lot of time, so for now I'm just going to keep gluten out of my diet and focus on healing my gut, and then maybe I'll experiment with gluten in the far, far future. And I think that sometimes when we go into changing our habits with expectations, I'm making these changes so I can eat gluten again, it's not a good plan. My father has almost no cartilage in his knees. Anything he can do besides for knee replacement? I'm not really sure. I think that once the cartilage is kind of like ground down, I think that a knee replacement needs to happen, I think. But remember, guys, I'm not a doctor. What can help alleviate extreme PMS symptoms? So like I've talked about before, if you haven't already watched my highlight on both the menstrual cycle and progesterone, please do that. You guys need to understand that if the last half of your cycle is very rough, you're most likely not making enough progesterone. You need to first of all make sure that you're ovulating. If you're like, how do I know if I'm ovulating? That is the sign that you definitely need to start tracking your cycles. If you don't know how to track your cycles, then go watch my fertility awareness method highlight. I will, once I'm done with this live, I'll kind of go into my story and like write down which highlights you guys should be watching. If you haven't been around for a while, you're like, I don't know where to start, I'll do that. But you got to make sure that you're making progesterone in the last half of your cycle and detoxifying estrogen in the last half of the cycle, because estrogen is going to be what causes and drives PMS symptoms, and then also really harsh periods like heavy clotty periods, breast tenderness, headaches, irritability, that kind of thing. So you really, that last half of your cycle, you want progesterone running the show. And keep in mind, you guys, that, you know, it's not just about your health. Progesterone actually makes you more attractive to the opposite sex. It makes you more youthful. It makes you, your pheromones change. It makes your, you know, your skin age less slowly. It makes your hair thicker and healthier. It makes you burn glucose better. So when I say you need to be concerned with progesterone, I mean, you need to be concerned with progesterone. It's not just a matter of like, oh, it's like boring for my cycle. I'm like, if you want to age well and you want to like have that like glowy magnetism, you know, like we say, like people have a pregnancy glow, and I'm like, pregnancy glow is just progesterone, you guys. So if you truly want that, you need to be utterly concerned with if you're ovulating and if you're making enough progesterone when you ovulate. And I have a lot of resources here to help you. Are roasted vegetables not okay? No. So whenever, you know, first of all, we need to get out of this food rule mentality, you guys. There are no rules regarding food. If somebody is fear-mongering you into changing your habits, they need to just be gone. But when it comes to eating excessive amounts of vegetables, that can be a problem. I've seen so many women who come to me and they're like, I'm just like so bloated all the time. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm eating so well. And they're like eating like pounds and pounds of broccoli and things like that. I'm like, just don't eat so much of that stuff. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that anything in too high amounts is probably not a good idea. And so it's probably a good idea to, if you have digestive issues and if you're struggling with problems, mess around with your habits until you find something that works. But I never would say that roasted vegetables are not okay. It's just about, you know, you don't want to overconsume them, especially if you're having symptoms because of it. What about inulin fiber? It's really hot now. I know, and like, I'm not a fan. I actually am like more of a fan of like psyllium husk if you're gonna do that, or like citrus pectin, or even acacia fiber. But like inulin, acacia fiber, cellulose, they can be really irritating to the digestive system in most cases. So it just kind of depends, but people can have an allergy to all types of fibers, so it's just important to pay attention when you're consuming fibers. How do you feel about refined coconut oil for cooking so it doesn't have that coconut flavor? Yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's like one of those things where, you know, I guess it's personal preference. I've gotten to a point where I've just like adjusted to the taste and it doesn't even bother me anymore. But yeah, I mean, if you need to, like if it's one of those things where you can't handle it without getting it refined, then it's better to do it than not at all. However, like, you know, obviously the less processed your food is, the better. What are your go-to sweet treats? So many desserts have tons of nut butter. Yeah, so I'll like whip my own cream once a week or so, just with like grass-fed Organic Valley like heavy whipping cream, and I'll add like coconut sugar or raw honey or some vanilla, and then I'll like put a couple tablespoons of that on berries, or I really like to do just like, I really enjoy fruit, and so I love like a juicy, like some juicy pineapple, or I even sometimes will just have like some grape juice or some fresh squeezed orange juice. Like, I'm not really, you know, I don't feel like, oh, I can't have this or I can't have this. Like, I truly enjoy fruits, fruit juices, things with honey, and so I very rarely like crave sweets because I just eat them whenever I want to all day long. And then, but if you like crave sweets, dates with some grass-fed butter on them is actually a very good treat. It's like salted caramel a little bit. I'll also make, like, sometimes I'll make applesauce, which is really delicious. And I'll add like a coconut sugar, which gives it like this caramely flavor. I will do like apple or pumpkin, like crisp. So like you just spread it out in a baking dish and then you just make like a crumble topping. I'll do it out of like coconut sugar, a little bit of like gluten-free oats, a little bit of flour, like just like a crumble top, and then just bake it in the oven. So there'll be a lot of recipes like that and fully nourished, but I just, I just stick to stuff that just doesn't have nuts in it. And you guys remember that like it's very difficult to avoid nuts when you're avoiding like so many other foods. And that's why like I always bring to people's awareness, a lot of times when we cut out like things like dairy, or we cut out sugar, and we cut out fruit, and we cut out, root vegetables, it's like, what do you eat? Well, usually you rely very heavily on nuts, and you rely very heavily on cruciferous vegetables, and very heavily on like muscle meats. And so it's kind of one of those things where you can't restrict it all, and so you have to pick and choose. But if what you're doing is not working for you, then maybe experiment with some other things. I've been having daily bowel movements. If I do an enema after I have a lot of stool come out, does this mean my bowel movements have been incomplete, or does the enema reach areas that weren't ready? It's hard to know. Are you doing like high volume enemas? If you're doing very high volume, it could, but usually a peristalsis, a true bowel movement, should actually clear the whole large intestine. So remember, our small intestine is in the middle, like deeper within, and then our large intestine goes around. And so, a true bowel movement will really move most of what's in that large intestine. But if your bowel movements feel complete, I wouldn't like worry about it or make an issue out of it. It's just more like, it is weird that you have a lot of stool coming out. But it would make sense if you're doing like high volume and it was getting all the way to the other side of the colon. That's why I asked about the volume. Also, I have been weight restored for over a year. My digestion and hormones have still never been the same. Doctors say everything should be back and normal now. I do a lot that you recommend already. Also, I've been weight restored. I'm not sure what that means. I think it's a typo, but I'm not sure. And I'm not really sure what that means. What does it mean when you have darkness under your eyes? Usually it just means you're exhausted AF. So you are either not eating enough, or you're not sleeping enough, or you're exercising too hard. So just like things like that, like stress-wise. Or it could also be a liver issue. So like lack of B vitamins. Sometimes it can be like an iron deficiency or an iron overload. So there are things like you want to look into if you're like, well, I'm not stressed, I'm eating enough, I'm sleeping well, I feel great, it's just my dark circles under my eyes, then maybe look a little deeper. But a lot of times people don't have dark circles when they are really healthy and feel good. How would you improve your gut to eat gluten again? So I avoided it for a very long time. I also just, healed my gut with really nourishing, easy to digest foods, like dairy and bone broth, and making sure I was getting lots and lots of gelatinous foods like gelatin and collagen, not overdoing it on the muscle meats, like getting a variety of proteins. I also really avoided grains and dairy, or grains and legumes for a very long time. And then like really what helped my gut heal so much is just like not doing as many nuts and seeds. For so long, like that was something that I like constantly tied into my diet. And the minute that I stopped eating so many, it really allowed the irritation to go away. I also stopped doing lots of like raw leafy greens and raw, like any kind of raw vegetables really, and made sure they were either really well cooked, or I was getting like more starchy vegetables like squashes and things like that. But I always say, like, if you're really trying to heal your gut, you kind of just go back, you have to like reparent yourself. When you were like a child or a baby, what would you feed yourself? Like mushy, really easy to digest foods. Like you would never give a baby a piece of kale because they would like choke and die, right? And so it's like the same thing. Like you really want things to be like mashed and steamed and really well cooked and just already almost pre-broken down, so that your body like breaks it down, keeps breaking it down, rather than has to do most of the heavy lifting. Any advice for nausea during pregnancy? It's not just morning, all day long, and horrible. Does it have to do with hormonal imbalance? Actually, a lot of times nausea is just due to a salt deficiency. So something as simple as drinking a little sea salt mixed in water in the morning can actually help with nausea. Because your needs for sodium go up while you're pregnant, and so just like a little bit of some like high quality sea salt can be helpful. Always ask your doctor before increasing your salt. I'm ovulating infrequently and my LH levels are 3 times my FSH level. How do I regulate my LH level? So remember that LH is made by the pituitary gland in the brain to talk to the ovaries to get them to ovulate. And so what happens is when the body is pumping out too much estrogen, LH will continue to rise. So many women who have LH, high LH are struggling with estrogen dominance. They have too much estrogen in relationship to progesterone. They are not making enough progesterone. And so many times getting those LH levels down, it can be very helpful to just do bioidentical progesterone. So ask your doctor about it. If your doctor's not helpful, look into experimenting with it on your own. Just do your own research. This is not medical advice, so it's kind of one of those things where, you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons and decide for yourself. But it can be very helpful to kind of get those progesterone levels up and then also help open up your detoxification pathways to make sure estrogen is getting out. Because remember, you guys, so that first half of your cycle during the follicular phase, follicle stimulating hormone is stimulating those follicles to get towards ovulation. But then once the ovaries are ready to ovulate, they will spike estrogen. Or that one follicle is ready to ovulate, then estrogen will spike. Estrogen tells the brain or the pituitary gland to pump out LH, luteinizing hormone, and then that luteinizing hormone is what actually causes that egg to drop. So if you have elevated estrogen levels chronically, it can continue to cause your body to pump out luteinizing hormone. So that's one thing to look into for sure. Can colloidal silver sprayed on the scalp be helpful for dandruff? I guess it could. I don't see why it's not, like, it's worth a try. I find that caffeine is really helpful. Also, progesterone is actually helpful for the scalp. I've done a lot of weird stuff. DHEA. And even doing coconut oil masks like once per week, meaning that you like saturate your scalp with coconut oil and like saturate all your hair with coconut oil and then sleep on it overnight and then wash it out in the morning, can be really helpful for actually like balancing the scalp levels. But some people have also talked about like sulfur, so like sulfur based things. Even if you just like mix MSM into like a water bottle and spray it on your scalp, that can be helpful for dandruff as well. But I've never heard of colloidal silver. Thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge. Appreciate you. I appreciate all you guys. I've heard you say that we should cut out starches when trying to treat Candida and SIBO. I'm intolerant to dairy. How do you recommend me getting carbs in? So it's kind of one of those things. I shouldn't say cut out starches. You should probably find a tolerance when it comes to starches. So everyone's a little different. Some people can tolerate very little starches, and some people can tolerate a little bit more. So it just kind of depends on what you're going through. I think that fruits can be helpful during SIBO and like things that are going to absorb directly into the stomach, like raw honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, things like that. But actively clearing SIBO is it's kind of one of those more difficult things to do. So it is important to actively like kill the bacteria that you're trying to get rid of so that you can get back to eating starches as soon as possible, because they are very healing to the hormones. Is some dark chocolate or plantain chips okay when trying to treat Candida or SIBO? You guys have to really stop focusing on the food and more focus on the ingredients. Dark chocolate is fine if it's based with like cacao butter, but if it has like weird alkali, like processed cacao or cocoa, and has junk ingredients like soy in it, then of course it's not okay. Whereas the same for plantain chips, what are they fried in? Are they fried in shitty oils? Then no, they're not okay. But if they're fried in coconut oil or maybe some palm oil, that's a little bit better. And so if you're trying to heal your gut, you need to actively look at what ingredients you're consuming, because guar gums, polyunsaturated fats, carrageenans, any type of inflammatory ingredients are going to be the problem, not actually the foods. So it's very dependent on the person though. Some people can't handle cocoa or cacao at all with their gut issues, and some are fine with it. Same for plantains. They can be really, like that starch can be really harsh on the gut. And then some people is fine. So it just really depends. But I really recommend if you're going to, do plantain chips, you might as well do actually like whole food cooked starches, like butternut squash that's steamed and smashed, or plantains that are, steamed or baked, because then you're controlling the ingredients in your food and you're cooking them in a way that breaks those starches down. So I always say, you guys, when you're trying to heal your gut, if you're too restrictive, you're going to start to binge. And binging is the worst thing you can do for your gut. It's way better to have small amounts of starch throughout the day than to binge on starch at the end of the week or eat a whole bag of plantain chips. That is the worst thing you can do. And so it's so much better to don't restrict to just restrict. Restrict only what is necessary to make yourself feel good and heal. If you're making progress, you're fine. Don't restrict harder just to restrict. I hope that makes sense. And then when is the best time to take antifungal, antibacterial when trying to heal Candida SIBO? It really depends on the protocol you're on. I honestly think that if it's possible, just go get an antibiotic from the doctor for SIBO. And it not always is beneficial. I mean, it needs to be in conjunction with other things, but it can be so helpful. Even if you're just kicking off your process with that. But if you're doing it the natural route, taking things on an empty stomach, like in between meals, can be helpful. But again, if it makes you feel really sick, then you kind of want to maybe take it with meals at first. So it really just depends on what's best for you. What are your thoughts on food tests? I had one done and results said I had severe sensitivities to eggs, dairy, and garlic. Based on what you're saying, all those things are very nutritious, so IDK, what to do? I think food sensitivity tests are a waste of time and money, and they really cut off your food intuition. I mean, there's so many women that have come to me with food sensitivity tests that tell them to not eat the only things that they truly tolerate. They feel okay eating those foods and everything else. And so when you start to avoid foods, you have to ask yourself the question, you have the responsibility. If you're going to restrict a food, you need to replace the nutrients in that food. So a lot of women just restrict dairy, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. Where are you going to get your vitamin A? Where are you going to get your calcium? And where are you going to get your fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and vitamin K? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, exactly. You need to make an actual conscious effort to get those nutrients back into your diet. And it's going to be very difficult because to get enough calcium, I mean, you're going to have to consume so many cooked leafy greens or greens broths, or you might have to make your own eggshell calcium. It's hard to get calcium without milk. And it's the same thing with vitamin A. Unless you're eating liver and dairy, you're probably not getting enough. And so it's just one of those things where if you truly feel better without them, that's fine, but get to the point where you can digest them again. Remember that most immunity issues and food sensitivity problems are actually caused by low thyroid function, because that's going to directly affect your immune system. So it's just one of those things where you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons and do your own research. But in my opinion, I don't run them. I've only ran one or two in my practice, and I stopped running them a long time ago because I just hate them. I just think they further confuse people. They don't make people feel empowered, and they never help people heal. I usually sleep better in my luteal phase. Is that because of progesterone? How can I sleep better in my follicular phase? So yes, that is usually because of progesterone, because progesterone is anti-stress or anti-cortisol. And so a lot of times if women are not sleeping good the first half of their cycle, it usually means there's a lot of stress at play. There's a lot of cortisol or adrenaline at play that needs to be taken care of, because you want to sleep really good all month long. You'll probably sleep better that second half of the cycle, but you still want to be sleeping good during your follicular phase. And so I would really recommend making sure you're eating every couple of hours, making sure you're getting enough sea salt or Himalayan pink salt, making sure you're getting enough protein, carb, and fat, and working on that, food frequency. Don't fast. Don't go a long time without eating, and also go through proper sleep hygiene. Make sure you're relaxing an hour or two before bed. Make sure you're limiting screens and starting to clear your mind for the night. So that's kind of what I would make sure. Sometimes we have to take more active measures to get good sleep. How do I sleep better during the luteal phase? Get that progesterone up. So if you're not sleeping good during the luteal phase, you probably don't have high enough progesterone to keep estrogen at bay, which is going to cause stress, and it's going to keep you from sleeping. Remember, progesterone directly affects your sleep. My husband has nosebleeds pretty frequently out of nowhere, and some last a long time. What could be causing this, and how can he decrease frequency? Usually, chronic nosebleeds are caused by a vitamin K deficiency, because remember, like, vitamin K is what's going to actually help clot the blood. And so if the blood's too thin, a lot of times nosebleeds can happen. So sometimes as simple as just supplementing vitamin K2 can help with nosebleeds. But it can also sometimes be because of allergies or like histamine issues. So it's just one of those things where you kind of have to look into like multiple options. But I usually say, like, I would start with something simple like vitamin K2, and then maybe like dig a little deeper and see if there's maybe like some, overgrowth, like yeast, fungus growing the sinuses, things like that. Himalayan salt good, sea salt, what's the best option? I like sea salt personally, or Himalayan pink salt is fine, and then it just has a little bit more impurities. And then Morton's canning salt is also a good option. And I know it's not cute or like fancy, but it does the trick. Oh my gosh, I got through all the questions, you guys. So I'm going to keep it open for questions for a few more minutes. I'm going to just chat to you guys since you're here about if you guys want an update on Fully Nourished. I took last week off, and I really buckled down and didn't answer emails. I left the office and I just focused on Fully Nourished. I got a huge amount of work done, and I'm almost done. So it's probably going to be by the end of this week, like mid next week, I'm going to be finishing up everything. And so it's probably going to be like a week and a half or so, and Fully Nourished will be launched. So you will not miss it. I will make sure that everybody knows. It will be open for 2 weeks, be open for forever, but the 2 weeks, the $100 off will be, you guys will be able to get $100 off the first 2 weeks. So I appreciate you guys for waiting. I will announce a specific date in the next couple of days. I just want to make sure there's like a true end in sight, and I'm like wrapping everything up, and then Fully Nourished will be out very soon. Hi Jess, what could cause lower left abdomen pressure? I'm not really sure. It could be like, is it reproductive or is it in your colon? It's hard to know. You definitely should get that checked out to make sure that everything's okay, that's serious. And then if not, look into, if your gut's inflamed or things like that. So it could be colon related, it could be reproductive related, but it is important if you have pressure to make sure you get that checked out, especially if it's near where the appendix would be. How many pages is it so far? So Fully Nourished is not an ebook, you guys. It is an online course. It has modules and lessons that walk you through truly how to heal, and then it does come with an accompanied nutrition guide, recipe book. It has about the food, over 100 recipes, and then you have handouts that get that are throughout. So you'll have lists of this and how to do this, a journal entry. This is a full program, so it's walking you through step by step in a prioritized order, what needs to take place. So module 1 is just kind of about prepping your mindset, getting organized, kind of getting your relationship with your body under control, how to track progress, that kind of thing. I'm going to teach you how to use your metabolic markers, your temperature, and your pulse, and then also encourage you to not use weight as a gauge, because remember that Fully Nourished is more for it's a blueprint for healing you metabolically. And so the goal, of course, is eventually to lose weight, but if you truly want to feel better, sometimes you need to focus on getting your body what it needs before you can actually start forcing weight loss. And so the goal for Fully Nourished, I wish I could say you're going to lose this much weight in 6 weeks, but if somebody's doing that, they're probably doing you a disservice. So the goal is to give you guys the information that you need to heal, and then you guys get to do with it what you will. It also goes through, so the second full module is about how to form a plate, macronutrients you need to be aware of, nutrients to get into your diet, the foods you want to avoid. It also teaches you how to do proper nutrient timing, proper portion control, and then also, I encourage you that if you're worried about weight gain or weight loss, you do need to make sure that when you're transitioning the types of foods you're eating, you're not changing the amount that you're eating too quickly. You kind of want to make changes gradually, or your body can kind of freak out. So I go through all of that. I go over cravings, and then The third module is the things that you need to be aware of lifestyle-wise that are also going to affect metabolic function. So sunlight, exercise and movement, sleep, and supplementation. I do a lot of DIY food-based supplementation in Fully Nourished. I tried to keep supplements as very conservative as possible just because I don't always think like a big stack of supplements is what is necessary for healing. I go over like which ones you want to make sure you include and then what's optional. And then the fourth module is like extra added things, so like how to cycle, sync, or understand your cycle, liver support, clearing toxins out of your lifestyle, things like that. But those are like, tweaking things even further. So I do things very gradually and progressively so that you can, first focus on nutrition, then focus on the lifestyle habits you need to be concerned with, then focus on other lifestyle habits that you can add in afterwards. And then at the end, I kind of pull it all together. I'll do like frequently asked questions. I make sure you have you can troubleshoot. And then you're also going to be added to a private Facebook group. So everyone that's in Fully Nourished, including myself, including my assistant, will be able to kind of communicate in that Facebook group and kind of like post, things that we're enjoying, foods that we've found, questions that we have, troubleshooting, if something's going wrong, like, hey, what do you guys think about this? That kind of thing. So it's going to have everything that you need, and then I'm going to constantly update it. So my goal is to have, a new recipe book, probably like once every 6 months or so, and like make sure there's updated recipes. I also am going to make sure that I'm constantly updating information, adding information. So if you're a part of the program, you will always be a part of the program. You will constantly and consistently have access to anything new, and you'll be notified of if things change, because nutrition science always changes, you guys. And when I learn something new, you're gonna learn something new. So Fully Nourished is gonna be $287, but that's actually a pretty good price if you're looking at like working one-on-one with me. You're learning about like what you would learn probably in about 8 sessions with me. And so you're getting a really good deal. And then the first 2 weeks of launch, it's gonna be $100 off, because I just want you guys to know that you're appreciated for just waiting and going through this process with me and really supporting me. So it's gonna be $187 for that first 2 weeks. So just know that like that will be extended to you for sure. My 14-year-old daughter, no period yet, has higher amounts of lip hair, facial hair. Any advice, please? Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to get her hormones checked, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and thyroid. Stress hormones can also be at play. If she has a lot of anxiety or doesn't eat really well or doesn't sleep really well or is exposed to screens a lot, then that could also be stress at play. So it's important to check her hormones just as much as yours. If we have an upcoming appointment with you, should we still do Fully Nourished? It's just kind of what you prefer. I think that it's helpful. I think eventually it's going to be a prerequisite to working with me, just because it's like when I work with somebody, I pretty much just the first things that we focus on are what's going to be in Fully Nourished. So I put into Fully Nourished exactly like step by step what the basics are when you work with me. However, when you work one-on-one with me, you have me, like access to me, and I really tailor things specifically to you. So as a practitioner, I kind of prioritize what you need, and we focus on those things first. You also are aware, you get lab testing, and I point you in the right direction when it comes to lab testing, and we can, I take your whole health history and I really tailor it to you. Whereas, Fully Nourished is not going to be as tailored. It has a lot of information, so you can kind of tailor things to yourself, but it's similar to working with me, but it's not the same. So it's kind of whatever somebody prefers. Besides gluten, are there any other grains that you prefer to completely avoid? Yeah, I mean, I don't think that most grains are very difficult to digest, and they're not doing you much good at all. So I always say, like in Fully Nourished, I'll be talking about like removing foods that don't serve you. It's not necessarily about like removing foods that are bad for you. It's more about like, what are your goals? You need to eat for your goals. And it's kind of one of those things where it's not about what you can and cannot eat. It's what is this food doing for me when it comes to reaching where I want to go. And so grains tend to be pretty inflammatory. They have phytates and lectins and things that are going to bind to nutrients in your gut and prevent your gut from breaking it down. So I don't really love any grains that have the bran on them. So like brown rice, quinoa, anything like that, they're harsh on the gut. So I really recommend, like, if if you're going to do grains, make sure they're actually kind of more on the processed side, like white rice, for example, has the bran removed, or, you know, oatmeal that's gluten-free and really well cooked, like slow cooked oatmeal. And I really avoid most grains, and I recommend that if you have gut issues or inflammation or you have a hard time losing weight, you avoid most grains as well. And then when you do grains, they're easy to break down and digest. Any tips for female athletes that are trying to balance, maintain hormone levels while doing high amounts of activity, practices 5 times a week? Yeah, so, you know, it's one of those things where women have to understand that intense exercise, there's just more and more studies coming out that intense exercise just completely obliterates your hormones. And it's the intense exercise itself that's doing that. A lot of times when you're impaired hormonally and then also your gut's impaired, when you're exercising, you're releasing endotoxins or those inflammatory compounds coming from your gut. And then on top of that, you know, your hormones are already imbalanced. And so it's just placing a greater burden on the body. So the goal is to not necessarily, like, I guess you can't really expect to get optimized when you're intensely exercising and you need to kind of chill to heal. However, you can take measures to protect yourself as much as possible. So it's very important to make sure you're eating plenty, especially if you're doing intense exercise that's very calorie and energy depleting. It's important to eat easy to digest and easy to break down foods. It's also important to make sure you're binding to those endotoxins. So like raw carrots regularly, well-cooked mushrooms regularly, even doing activated charcoal sometimes might help. So really focusing on gut health and then doing things that are gonna quickly digest so that things are just like sitting in your digestive system while you're working out or while you're exercising. So, and then really prioritizing sleep and recovery and then mineral balance, electrolytes. So coconut water is an athlete's best friend, as well as magnesium, both Epsom salt baths, magnesium oil, and then like magnesium bicarbonate or just making your own magnesium. Or taking magnesium, whatever you prefer. And then just making sure that you're getting all the vitamins you need to repair. And then protein is another one. So like amino acids are so essential. You know, your needs for protein go up when you're an athlete. And so, you know, get plenty of protein from collagen and bone broth and then, you know, really high quality meats and dairy and eggs and things like that. So just really going above and beyond to take care of your body and understanding that every time you do intense practice, you're placing stress on an already stressed body. And it's not something to worry about or stress about. It just kind of is what it is, but you want to go above and beyond to recover from that intense stress. Do you think it's necessary to have PCOS diagnosed by an endocrinologist? And what are some good ways to detect if we have PCOS? I don't necessarily think it's necessary, especially if you're just like constantly frustrated and you're just constantly trying to get a diagnosis and no one's giving it to you. However, like if you truly want that diagnosis and you want to know if you have PCOS, you do kind of need to get the testing done, see if you have high androgens, whether it's DHEA or testosterone, and get an ultrasound done. But that doesn't always mean that you don't have it, even if those come back as negative, or it doesn't always mean that you do have it. There's a lot of women that have been misdiagnosed, and then they, you know, get stressed down, and they get their metabolism working well, and their cells working well, and their PCOS symptoms go away. So it's kind of one of those things where, you know, if you have PCOS or you don't, the treatment is the same. So, you know, you're trying to reduce stress, you're trying to balance your blood sugar, you're trying to balance protein, carb, and fat. You're exercising, you're sleeping well, you're getting enough sunlight, you're taking the right supplements. I mean, it's really going to be very similar. You're making sure you're making enough progesterone, you're detoxifying estrogens. If you have thyroid issues, you're actively working on those, or you're, you know, going to your doctor and getting natural desiccated thyroid or T3. You know, it's like very similar. Like, so to me, it's like the diagnosis just is, I guess, places emphasis on the fact that things need to change. To me, a diagnosis is just a turning point. It's a physical reminder that your body is seriously under duress. But if you don't need a diagnosis to make changes, then it's kind of one of those things where why pursue it and just get started. Have you heard of TRS? It's a safe, gentle, heavy metal detox. I've heard you talk about detoxing, LOL, so I'm guessing I know my answer. You know, like, it's so weird. I think it's like an MLM, because it's like, I don't know, it's weird. Like, I never heard of it, and then like everyone keeps asking me about it, and so I like Googled it, and I was just like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, what? So, you know, it's you have to understand, you guys, that when you have heavy metals, your body is not stupid. Your body's not like, oh, we're just gonna let the heavy metals just like hang around because like, who cares, right? Your body's pretty aware that heavy metals are not good. However, you know, there are certain impairments, whether your body's not working properly or detoxifying properly, that's gonna impair how you break down heavy metals. So you wanna get your body actually working more efficiently before you start like pulling heavy metals from your tissues. Probably not a good idea when your liver's impaired to start pulling mercury out, you know what I mean? So, and then there are simple things that can actually help detoxify heavy metals. Coffee, for example, binds to iron and binds to lots of other heavy metals. Fresh squeezed OJ is also a very potent metabolic heavy metal detoxifier. And then cilantro and like other herbs are very good chelators. So it's kind of one of those things where I personally have not really seen benefits from like just doing like a heavy metal detox without like supporting the whole person. Once you're like, let's say you do all the right things, you've laid the foundation, you're eating frequently, you're eating nutrient dense, you're really supporting your gut health, your liver health, and you're still not seeing improvements, and you know you have heavy metals, you've done like a HTMA, like a hair mineral analysis or something like that, then you can like start to play around with some things. But I would not do like a heavy metal detox with a very like metabolically impaired body. Like I just don't think it's safe, and I think it could probably do more harm than good. When you start to actively pull heavy metals from the tissues, they can very easily cross the blood-brain barrier. And there's actually a study that I read yesterday that said that people that do heavy metal detoxes, specifically EDTA chelation, which is usually what like functional medicine doctors do, they have higher concentrations of really toxic metals, like specifically mercury and lead, in their kidneys and their brain. Because what's happening is you're pulling it from the tissues, but the body's like, wait, I can't handle this. And so it's not actively getting it out, and so it's just in general circulation. So I think that a lot of people who are actively like promoting heavy metal detoxes don't really understand that, or they don't like look at the body as a whole and respect the body's wisdom. I personally always respect the body's wisdom, and I always take note, and I say maybe there's a reason why the body has accumulated this heavy metal, not saying like, oh, I'm going to override the body's wisdom now, and I'm going to do this work because the body can't do it. I'm like, the body is not stupid, and, is way wiser than we could ever be, and so there might be a reason why it's keeping heavy metals in a place where it is the most protected from them. Is high testosterone and DHEAS a sign of inflammation? Yes, and stress. Remember, you guys, that like I've always told you guys, is when you're under stress, cortisol and adrenaline, their main job is to break down your tissues to keep blood glucose stable. Because when you are under stress, your body has a need for more fuel, not less. And so a lot of times when we're under stress, we're not eating enough, we're not taking care of our body, and so that's why our body is under stress in the first place. And so our body has to manufacture fuel. The way that it manufactures fuel is by raising certain hormones that actually cause the tissues, specifically the muscle, the skin, the collagen tissue, the joint tissue, and even fat cells, to break down and be sent to the liver to turn into glucose, to keep blood glucose stable, to keep your cells going, because your cells burn glucose for fuel, for energy. And your body actually has to protect itself in certain cases. And so your heart, your lungs, and your brain are the tissues that your body doesn't want to break down under stress, right? Your body's like, let's make sure these are protected. And so those tissues just happen to be very rich in DHEA and testosterone because it is protective against cortisol breaking down the tissue. And so whenever we see testosterone and DHEA high, we need to ask ourselves, why is it high? It is the only thing that is powerful enough to both protect us from cortisol, or high stress hormones, and estrogen. And so many women who have high testosterone and high DHEA also have elevated estrogen and cortisol. or either one. And their body is actually protecting them from stress. Isn't that crazy? And so, like I always say, we need to respect the body's wisdom and not ask ourselves, why is testosterone, or we need to ask ourselves why testosterone and DHEA is high, and understand that maybe the body's actually doing something pretty wise. And we need to actually get rid of the inflammation, the estrogen, and the stress, and then we'll see testosterone and DHEA lower on its own because the body no longer has to protect itself. So, that is just a different way of looking at things, and it's important to see the body as very wise. And when hormones are imbalanced, it's not because the body's stupid or betraying you, it's actually the body having your back. How would I test for SIBO? I have been diagnosed with IBS, but still suffering. Yeah, IBS is really a struggle, and many times it's caused by either like very elevated levels of estrogen and serotonin and or SIBO. So you actually would have to request that from your doctor. Many times a breath test needs to be done. It's best to get a hydrogen methane breath test if you can, but a lot of times doctors will only do the hydrogen. So it's like you just want to try to get some kind of breath test and do it properly, follow the instructions. But yeah, they can test for SIBO for sure. You just have to request it. And sometimes they'll throw you through the loops, But if anything, you can always order your own breath test. I really like, you guys, a secret place where you can get any lab test you want on your own is Life Extension. And they very regularly run really good sales on their tests. And I actually send my clients there most of the time, like if they want to get their thyroid tested or something, because it's cheaper to have them run it there than run it through me. And so that is kind of a little trick. If you have a hard time getting any kind of test done, go to Life Extension. You can order literally any test online and run it on yourself. It's crazy. Thanks. Also, any thoughts on giving a 1-year-old raw goat or cow milk in substitution to breast milk a couple times a week? Do babies even need milk like typical doctors say? Hell yeah, babies need milk, especially if you're like not breastfeeding after a year. Yeah, it makes me sick when like people give their kids like almond milk or coconut milk's fine, but like if you truly want them to have those fat soluble vitamins and like build really strong bones and things like that, milk is where it's at for sure. However, like I guess when it comes to raw dairy products, I never give a recommendation just for legal reasons. I think like it's really important for you to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I think that like with raw dairy, it's kind of one of those things where it comes with risk, just like getting in a car and driving down the street or getting in a plane and flying. Like there's always risk, right? There's always a possibility that the plane could crash or you could get into a car crash. But it's like, all right, am I just not going to get into a car? So I think it's like important for you to kind of weigh the pros and cons there. Like for me personally, I'll probably feed my kid raw milk and not worry about it. However, like, I know the risks, and I know like if my child got sick, it's on me. There's very small amount of cases of raw milk, causing any kind of issues. But again, it's like you kind of want to weigh the pros and cons and make the decision that's best for your family. Even if it's just high quality grass-fed milk that is still pasteurized, I don't see a problem as long as your milk is non-homogenized. That is the problem with most milk products. That's going to immediately, like, they push the fat through these little, like the sift, and it kind of breaks it down, and that can really mess with how dairy is digested. So I don't see a problem with giving your child like goat's milk or cow milk, but you kind of need to make that decision for yourself of if if raw or pasteurized is a better option for you and your family. But yeah, I think that kids really truly do need lots of protein. Like the more nutrient dense the diet, the better. And that's going to be dairy, organ meats, high quality meats like grass-fed beef, bison, lamb, and it's going to be like eggs, pastured eggs, and then like lots of fruits and fruit juices, and just nutrient dense, mineral rich foods, broths, things like that. What's a really good starting point to reducing inflammation? Thank you. I think it's really a good starting point to stop eating industrial seed oils. I think that is the first step, because that alone really eliminates a lot of junk food, right? If you're avoiding like canola oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, like you're just not eating any of those polyunsaturated fats, you just immediately eliminated most things. It also gets you into the habit of turning foods over and looking at the ingredients, which is an amazing thing for inflammation. And so that's really the first step, is just remove those inflammatory seed oils. And then I think the second step would be to, if you're, still eating processed gluten products at that point, to eliminate gluten-rich products. But when you eliminate gluten, it's not about like going gluten-free. It's about eating naturally gluten-free foods. There's a big difference, right? Because if we're replacing pizza with gluten-free pizza, that does no good for you. But if we're replacing pizza with, making cauliflower crust with parm and some cauliflower, that's a whole different story. And so it's about really eating gluten or naturally gluten-free foods. And then just really focusing on natural anti-inflammatory foods. I really like fresh squeezed orange juice for reducing inflammation in the gut immediately. I also really like eating raw carrot daily. That really binds to toxins in the gut. And then regularly eating mushrooms. Those are kind of my 5 tips. So like get the polyunsaturated fats out first and replace them with like coconut oil, grass-fed butter, and ghee. Then do naturally gluten-free foods. Make sure you're eliminating gluten or processed bread products and cereal grains and things like that. And then move on to like the raw carrot daily, mushrooms regularly, and fresh squeezed orange juice. And you'll see a huge change in intestinal inflammation. You are amazing. Thank you for all your knowledge. I just appreciate you guys' time, and I really am proud of you for taking the time to like really truly care about your health and have the goal to heal. Like that takes courage, and that takes time, and that takes hard work, and your hard work does not go unacknowledged. How would I be tested for SIBO? I already said earlier, and maybe you had left for a second, you got to ask your doctor for a SIBO test. Usually they give you a breath test. Does having an MTHFR gene mutation impact hormone levels? I don't really genetics to me is kind of like unremarkable in my opinion. You guys have to understand politics and science to really understand why genetics is just BS. I don't want to say it's BS. I think there's some relevance to it. However, a lot of people are like grasping at straws when they have health issues, and they do all these like really random obscure tests, and they're still not getting better, right? At the end of the day, getting diagnosed with a gene mutation didn't really help in any way. And so an impaired liver detoxification is going to cause, impaired detoxification, period. Whether you have MTHFR or not. You still need amino acids. You still need to make sure you're eating anti-inflammatory. You still need to make sure you're not getting a bunch of endotoxins coming from the gut. You need to stop eating irritating inflammatory foods. You got to eat the right fats. You got to eat the right protein. You got to eat enough carbs. All of those things matter regardless of if you have a gene mutation or not. Once you've got the foundations down, like I always say, then you can start digging deeper. But many times, once you actually get the foundations down, you're not doing all this obscure, weird health shit, then you actually begin to see healing take place, and you're like, oh, well, it doesn't seem like the MTHFR is really bothering me any longer. So it's kind of one of those things where I think that once people don't know where to go with their health, they just go and they get more gene testing done, and then it just tells them they have a mutation, but that mutation doesn't tell them anything except for that they may or may not be detoxifying this properly. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I think it's more overwhelming than helpful. And how do we know that people have not had MTHFR gene mutations for thousands of years? We don't know that. What if this is a normal occurrence? How do we know? Because it's so new. Also, gene testing is very unreliable. They say it's up to 40% of cases can be false positives or false negatives. And so it's just one of those things where I think it's very highly politicized. I also think it is something that you guys have to understand that there's 2 areas of research in science, genetics and metabolism. They can go in 2 separate ways. Well, there is a push for genetic testing, and funding is being dumped into genetics because genetics is a billion-dollar business. When you get that gene test, they sell your information to anyone that will buy it. And metabolism is actually where it's at when it comes to healing and making sure that you are actually getting the health of your dreams. However, there's no funding going into that. So it's very infrequent that studies are being done in that realm because the funding is being pushed in a different direction. So it's just, I could go on and on about it, but I wouldn't stress too much about gene mutations. Any tips for horrible heart palpitations from hormones? Get your stress levels down. Eat very frequently. Make sure you're getting enough sea salt. Really make sure you're focusing on protein, carb, and fat, and really make sure you're eating with food frequency and see if that helps. Thank you. She got a pretty intense rash from the raw dairy a few days in a row, but I think possibly it's because I never really ate it when she was little and maybe I overdid it. Yeah, so when it comes to actually like reintroducing dairy, even for children, it needs to be very tiny amounts, very slow, and they have to actually build up a tolerance just like anybody else. Finally decided to go off birth control and I'm terrified my acne will come back full force. Tips: make sure you're detoxifying well, making sure you're taking care of your body. Your goal is to get back to ovulating, and don't stress. Stress is the worst thing. So just relax. Whatever happens, happens, right? It's like, okay, what was your other choice? You were either going to stay on birth control, which you weren't comfortable with, or you're going to get off of it. And so it's kind of one of those things where you have to look at it clearly and say, okay, whatever happens, happens, and I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to support my body as much as possible. I'm going to make sure my stress levels stay low. I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to get sunlight. I'm going to make sure I'm opening up detoxification pathways, and I'm just going to pray for the best. You know what I mean? You are seriously so amazing. Thank you so much for all the tips. Oh, I appreciate you guys. So Instagram's cutting me off, but I will make sure that these are uploaded. I also didn't upload like last Friday's live, so I'll make sure that I do that. And then remember, I go live on Friday mornings as well. So if you guys didn't get questions answered, I will be live again on Friday at 9 a.m. Why does gluten-free bread with yeast bother me? Could I have candida? Yeast is just kind of inflammatory, especially in gluten-free bread. All right, I love you guys. I'll see you soon.